Hello, Year 10, and welcome to week 2 of your online schooling. I hope that you're all well, and I hope that you're not too lonely, and I hope that it's going okay. So, I'm going to prepare you for your assessment, and I've made this video to just walk you through the second half of your assessment. So, last week we had a look at an extract from the novella, and we explored the importance of family in the novella. So, this is now the second half, and here we're going to answer the question, how does Scrooge present the importance of family in his novella, A Christmas Carol? So this is where you show knowledge of the whole text, and it's where you show further knowledge of themes. You don't need to worry too much about your AO2 or your language analysis in this part of the answer, because you will have already done that in the first part. This is where we want lots of detail and quotations and specific examples about other parts of the novel. So we actually covered this a couple of weeks ago in class. And the first thing you might want to think about is, who are all the families in A Christmas Carol and what do they all have in common? So we have the Cratchits, we have the Fezziwigs, we have Scrooge's own family, and we have Belle and her family. So what do all of these families have in common? Well, if we scroll through, a lot of children in these families, and I think children are quite important in this novel. So children are kind of presented as the heart of the family. They're quite energetic families. There's a lot of fun and feasting and jollity, and they enjoy being in each other's company. The families aren't all wealthy. The Cratchits definitely aren't wealthy. Even the Fezziwigs aren't particularly wealthy, but they are rich in their love for each other, and they're rich, they're spiritually wealthy. They enjoy each other's company and they're very happy. Families are definitely presented as happy in this novella. And there's a little bit of sadness around Belle's family, because even though they're very happy, Scrooge is sad and regretful, perhaps, that he did not get to experience this quality of family life for himself. So I would look at trying to include all of these different families in my answer, and I would say a little bit about each one. So I would start with an introduction where I just set out what I was going to do. I'd actually start with Scrooge's childhood, because I think it's important whenever you're exploring an idea in this novel to move from how Scrooge is at the beginning to how he is at the end, and show always the progression of Scrooge as the novel moves on. So I'd start with Scrooge's lonely childhood, and I would mention that he's quite isolated from his family. Then I would move on to Belle and her large family, the family, if you like, that Scrooge nearly had. Then I might talk about the Fezziwigs and the Cratchits. And then I'd talk about how at the end of the novel, Scrooge returns to the bosom, to the heart of his own family. He's kind of embraced by his own family. So how might that look if it was written down? I've written for you a model answer. So I would begin with a short introduction. Dickens populates his novella with happy families. There's the Cratchits, the Fezziwigs, Belle's family, and even Scrooge's own family in the form of his nephew Fred. However, at the beginning of the novella, Scrooge chooses to distance himself from all of these family situations. And then I would link this to Scrooge's childhood. So the reasons for this can be traced back to Scrooge's own dismal childhood. Dismal is just another word for sad. When the ghost of Christmas past takes Scrooge back to his childhood, the reader sees a solitary child, neglected by his friends, is left there still. So I've given that quotation and I need to explain it a bit now. So Scrooge has been left at school while all his friends have gone home for Christmas. He only has books for company. Even as a child, Scrooge is left out, and Dickens is suggesting that the reason he excludes himself as an adult is because he was excluded as a child. So if you see there, I've done a very small, not even a petal paragraph, maybe more of a peel paragraph. I've made the point that that he's lonely as a child, that he's isolated from his own family. I've given my quotation or my textual example. I've contextualized it. I've shown that I know which part of the novel that it comes from. I've given an extra detail there saying that he only has books for company. And I've explained that what Dickens is showing us is that Scrooge has been isolated and left out all of his life. And maybe this is the reason that he chooses to be lonely as an adult. Then I'm going to move on to Belle and her large family because they're the next family. Um, well, the Fezziwigs perhaps are the next family, but they're the next family that come up in the novel. So I'm going to link this with some linking words. So I've got further. So I could have said something like, this idea is developed further, or this idea is further extended when the ghost of Christmas past shows Scrooge I've got a typo there, his ex-fiancée and her large family. Scrooge again positioned out in the cold. And in this novel, whenever Scrooge is watching a family, right up until the end, right up until he knocks on the door and is welcomed into his own family, Scrooge is always outside of the window in the cold. And that's symbolic. He's out in the cold. Literally, he's out in the cold. Emotionally, he's out in the cold too. And he's looking in at this warm, cozy, loving scene. So this idea is extended further when the ghost of Christmas past shows Scrooge, his ex-fiancée, and her large family. Scrooge, again positioned out in the cold, looks in at Belle, her husband, and their happy brood, and is filled with regret at what could have been. Dickens emphasises the loneliness of Scrooge by contrasting it with the noise and jollity of Belle's family. So Scrooge, quiet, cold, alone, families, noisy, rambunctious, happy, warm inside. So I'd continue this idea. Another contrast to demonstrate the importance of family is the Fezziwigs. The Fezziwigs treat their employees as if they are their family. Oh, I've used the wrong there. Terrible. By throwing them a huge Christmas party with lots of food and dancing. I really ought to have proofread this better. I haven't got you to correct me. Another contrast to demonstrate the importance of family is the Fezziwigs. The Fezziwigs treat their employees as if they are their family by throwing them a huge Christmas party with lots of food and dancing. Each party guest is individually met by Fezziwig, and the apprentices are housed comfortably by Fezziwig in his shop. So I'm trying to introduce the idea there that Fezziwig not only looks after his own family, but actually he extends that family love to everybody he works with. So Fezziwig doesn't just look after his children, he kind of treats the people who he employs as if they were his family. And I'm going to give some examples of how he does this. And that's each party guest is individually met by Fezziwig, and the apprentices are housed comfortably by Fezziwig in his shop. If you remember that detail, they sleep under the counter in the shop, and Fezziwig stays behind at the end to make sure that they're okay. And you could put all of that in because all of that is textual understanding, and it's showing that you understand why Dickens has included these details in the novel. You don't need quotes for every single thing. Again, family is described as a place of comfort and fun. Dickens is encouraging Scrooge and the reader to imagine family in its widest possible sense, not just to include blood relatives. At the end of the novel, Scrooge embraces this idea when he becomes part of the Cratchit family and is described as a second father to Tiny Tim. Dickens is implying that we should treat everyone in our community as family. So even though Tiny Tim isn't actually Scrooge's family, like Fezziwig looked after him when he was a young man, Scrooge extends his responsibility as an employee and he looks after Tiny Tim as if he was his own. And I'm hoping that maybe during this time where actually a lot of businesses are under strain, we're seeing some of that in the community. I know of some businesses who are keeping people on, who are paying people even though they're finding it very difficult. And it's this idea actually that we're all in it together. And the idea of community at the moment is quite present. And I've never felt actually such a strong sense of community as I am feeling at the moment with my neighbours and people really reaching out to families that are not their own. And Dickens would be really happy to see that. I'm really happy to see that because that's what I believe in too. But Dickens would like this kind of feeling that actually, there's difficulties and we're all facing them together as family. So I would end with Dickens returning to his own family. Unfortunately, you're slightly blocked out here by the camera. Oh no, I can scroll up. So in A Christmas Carol, family is a place where you always belong. At the end of the novel, Scrooge is welcomed back into his family by his nephew Fred with open arms. Let him in. It's a mercy he didn't shake his arm off. So I put another quote in there. Here, Fred models the welcoming and loving attitude that Dickens is saying that families should show to one another, regardless of their past behaviour. So we have another big theme coming in here, and it's the theme of forgiveness and acceptance. Dickens sees family as a microcosm of, of how society should work. We should welcome each other, behave generously, and enjoy each other's company. And I have misused a semicolon. What I wanted there was a colon, because colons are gateway pieces of punctuation, and you can use them to mark a point where you're going to explain an idea. So my idea is that Dickens sees families as a microcosm of how society should work. Microcosm is a very fancy way of saying a mini version of how society should work. We used that word in Lord of the Flies, if you remember. We talked about the island being a microcosm of the world, or the boys being a microcosm of society. So Dickens sees families as a microcosm of how society should work. Colon, explanation. We should welcome each other, behave generously, and enjoy each other's company. If you wrote that, I think you're looking at a really safe path. I think you're showing clear understanding. I think you're safely into level 4, maybe even to level 5 if you could develop it a little more thoughtfully. But I think that would get you, it would certainly get you a 6, maybe even a 7. I think that's the sort of level of writing that we're looking at here. I'm just going to show you the rest of this PowerPoint because I've attached this PowerPoint to the assessment, to the, it's not called it, to the assignment. And I've just included some notes. I didn't actually write these notes. Oh, is it going to let me do this? Yeah, I didn't write these notes, but I thought they were quite handy. And they just take you through all the different kind of aspects of family in the novel, and they give you some ideas of what they could say. So that's what I've put together. So what I want you to do with that is I want you to take the work from last week and the work from this week, and I want you to sit for an hour and put them together in an assessment. You can use all of this to prepare, but I would quite like the assessment to be your own words. I don't want you copying for the assessment. I want you to try and remember this stuff and write it in your own words. And obviously I'll be able to tell if you haven't written it in your own words because I've written all of this and I can recognize my own writing. Okay, I hope you kind of enjoyed this. I know it's not super fun, but I thought it was more fun than a long screed of writing. I hope it was helpful. Please email me if you have any questions or any thoughts. I'm really missing you. I know that if you had been in the room, you would have said things that would have made me think about the whole thing completely differently. You would have brought your own ideas in, and it would be better and richer for that. But unfortunately, we're in the situation we're in. But please feel free to comment underneath in Teams, or to send me an email, or ask for more support if that's what you want. Okay. Hope you're all well. Keep safe. Keep well. See you soon.